Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Hanna here today, and today's video I thought would be really interesting because I wanted to do a video that's really going to be a discussion. It's really going to be something that involves all of you guys. I wanted to do a video called "What is the greatest horror movie ever made?" Now, this is going to be a tough one. I have no script, I have no outline, so to speak, but I know what my personal answer is going to be for this. I think it's important to talk about when it comes to horror movies. There are so many different types of horror fans, and there are so many different types of movies that affect horror fans in very individualistic ways. And it's really interesting that I find myself in a category that I don't see this one named quite very often, and what I think the greatest is. But I think it's important for me to talk about what I think the greatest horror movie is and why for me. There are some things I think are very important when picking something like this, and I think there are other things that may not be as important. One of the things I think may not be as important as some people may see is box office for the movie. When it came out in theaters, how much money it made. How many horror movies do we know today that are fan favorites, cult fanatical hits that bombed? Movies like John Carpenter's The Thing. The movie made no money in the theater, and it's heralded by a lot as John's greatest movie he ever did. There's many examples like that. I just find that interesting that, some movies that are truly just ahead of their time, so to speak. And it's interesting to see how movies can change over time. It really is something interesting to look at. But I think there are also some things for me that are extremely important. One thing for me is like the historical impact of what it did. Movies that are somewhat game changers, where there was the world before that movie came out, and then there was the world after that movie came out. And that's one of the most important things for me. Now, if I was going to have to say one answer right now, there are really two movies that I wanted to say for what I think the greatest horror movie ever is. But some examples is something like Psycho. Psycho changed the game with horror movies. Now, I don't think that Psycho was really actually the very first slasher movie. History could tell us yes or no with a little bit of research. But to say that Psycho didn't change the game is something to be said. I think Psycho is one of the most important horror movies in the world. Horror movies were shaped after that. Psycho has this reputation of changing the setting of horror from gothic movies and castles and outer-worldly places to bringing the horror into our home in a major way. And I think Psycho is truly one of the greatest horror movies ever made. You got another movie like Jaws, a movie that made the entire world scared to go into the water. It's funny when I hear people say that Jaws isn't a horror movie. Of course, all that stuff is subjective, but to me it's just like, the movie made everyone scared to go in the water. Really the same way Psycho made people scared to get into the shower. It's hard. There are days of the week where you can ask me what the greatest horror movie is, and I would say, oh, it's Jaws. Jaws is one of the greatest horror movies ever made. But then there are also days like Psycho, 1960. Psycho is probably one of the best movies ever, much less a horror movie. And then there are days like today where I find myself really appreciating the history, the love and passion, and the hard work behind a movie like Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead is one of those movies that I could not live in a world without. Night of the Living Dead shaped zombies as we know it. Night of the Living Dead is a movie that, from start to finish, tells this amazing story, with George Romero having political aspects but subtle. Having a lead black actor at that time was really taboo and not seen a lot, and George Romero was pushing boundaries while making one of the scariest horror movies in the world. Night of the Living Dead probably caused more nightmares than any horror film ever, and I absolutely loved the film. The understatement of the impact of a movie like Night of the Living Dead, I think, is something to really be discussed. How many movies that I love would not exist without Night of the Living Dead? If you guys know me even half, my favorite movie of all time is The Return of the Living Dead. Without Night of the Living Dead, there is no Return of the Living Dead. Without Night of the Living Dead, there is no Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead. So many movies would not exist without Night of the Living Dead. So when you talk about impact, I don't know how many more horror movies had more impact than Night of the Living Dead. Another movie I constantly being seen thrown around as one of the greatest horror movies ever is John Carpenter's Halloween. Now you can tell I'm a big fan of the movie. I'm wearing a sweatshirt of Halloween right now. It's interesting though. I never saw Halloween as being the greatest horror movie ever made. That's just a personal choice on me. I think it's one of the most incredibly stylistic, most amazing soundtracks ever, but I don't know. Halloween gives me the chills up my spine when I watch it, but it doesn't give me the effect of the way I leave the theater or the way I leave the room when I watch it, the way a Night of the Living Dead does, or a movie like Jaws. Jaws truly made me scared to get into the water. Till this day, I can't get in the ocean without thinking of the movie Jaws. Halloween always makes me think of the movie around Halloween time for sure, and it's just one of the greatest soundtracks. And I could definitely see the argument for it being the best. Like I said, this is all subjective. And there are some really great arguments for Halloween. I know this. Halloween definitely shaped the way the movies were going to go in the 1980s. So to take anything away from Halloween would be silly on my part. I do think it's one of the best horror movies ever. But for me, it's not the best. One movie that I've found myself constantly sticking with over the last 5 or 6 years of what I think the best horror movie ever is a movie from the 1970s. And it's funny because I feel it takes a backseat to Halloween in terms of the effect that it had on the world because of just how popular and just how the reach Halloween had. But the movie I think that could really have an argument for being the best ever is 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Here's a movie that I think just really has that big impact, really makes you feel the movie when you get out of the theater. Granted, I'm from the South as well. I've seen roads and areas that look resemblant to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That movie has this profound effect on me that stays with me whenever I get done watching it. I hear the movie, I feel the movie. It's one of those movies that truly, truly haunts me, and I think could really happen out there. Granted, you could say that for Halloween. Maybe not a movie like Night of the Living Dead, but a movie like Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they're kind of real. Real situations that could happen. Crazy families down in the South, a boogeyman, a guy who puts on a mask and just kills at random and doesn't stop. The effect of horror movies is so important. And also the sound of horror movies is probably, as a musician, one of the most important things to me. Some of the examples I gave have sounds that truly are so iconic, you could never forget them. Halloween probably being the biggest example. A movie like Night of the Living Dead has that classic feel. When I hear it, I know it instantly. It's always with me. I carry it around with me in my head. And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the sounds from that movie, the chainsaw. You can't hear the cranking of a chainsaw without thinking of Leatherface. These are some movies that I think are the contenders for one of the best, if not the best, horror movie ever. But if I really had to pick, and this is my personal answer, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think is the greatest horror movie ever, it's really close for me between Night of the Living Dead and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But one of those two just gets into my bones a little bit more than any other horror movie on this entire planet. That's 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In my humble opinion, I think it's the greatest horror movie ever made, and I've personally yet to find that movie that affects me in that guttural, visceral way, the way the Texas Chainsaw Massacre did. Now, of course, what's really great about a video like this is that's the way that movie affected me more than anything. But what movie affected you more than anything and to you makes it the greatest horror movie ever made? This isn't a video to start a debate or an argument about why mine might be the right answer and yours might be. I think this is a really personal answer. I think this is a really personal subject to have. And to pick a movie that could affect you more than anything to make it the greatest, I think is a fair question. So I ask you, what is the greatest horror movie ever made and why? Thank you guys for watching this video. This is Christian Hanna Horror. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to check out the comment section to see why you think your horror movie pick is the greatest ever. I'd love to know the effect it has on you in the past, present, and future. For now, this is Christian Hanna Horror saying thank you guys for watching this video. We'll see you guys next time.